Zanis Copperbelt Province brings to you The Lens, a program designed to bring insightful information on economics, mining, education, health, tourism, agriculture, environmental issues, sports, entertainment, current affairs, and many issues affecting the well-being of society.
Welcome to this review from Copperbelt Studios of Zanis. It's a review of President Hakainde Hichilema's trip to the People's Republic of China, getting to have you understand what benefits the trip has had for our country, especially with the grappling energy crisis that we are currently facing. Where some of those solutions found? Well, in answering those questions, I'm not alone. I'm being joined by Mr. Aden Matafwali, who happens to be resident of Ndola, but has a very good following and understanding of what's going on in the country. Mr. Matafwali, good to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Slima. Good morning or good afternoon, dear viewers and listeners.
Now, Mr. Matafwali, in my preamble, I indicated that last week, President Hichilema joined other foreign dignitaries, mainly African heads of state, in what was seen, and I will react to what we saw mainly on social media. You see, we saw other African presidents meeting the president of China, His Excellency Xi Jinping, and taking pictures, but it took quite a few days because President Hichilema was touring various economical industries in the People's Republic of China. What's your make of the president's trip to China?
Oh yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think when you talk about China and Zambia, we need to date back to the time of Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda and look at the strong relationship that has existed over a long period of time. Zambia and China are like, fraternal twins, I may use that term, in that China has heavily helped Zambia in many aspects of social and economic development. If we look at the 6 presidents that we've had, I think almost everyone has had a closer tie with the People's Republic of China when it comes to social and economic development. So the trip that was made by our Republican president recently to China, I think is one that is very paramount and should thoroughly monitored and looked at, especially at the time when Zambia is grappling with load shedding, long hours of load shedding, something that has never been seen here in our country. But we have to understand the challenges that normally comes about as a result of the climate change. Climate change was detected way back when Dr. Kaunda was Republican president, and we are talking of 30, 35 years ago. Now, successive presidents did not take so much time and attention to consider developing other alternatives of energy. We've relied so much on the hydro-produced energy, and with the going on of time, climate change has actually come in with its effects. And one of the effects is the reduced precipitation or the reduced rainfall in many parts of the world. So it has affected Zambia and many other countries in the region, as well as in the African continent. Now, as we are speaking, we've been hit by long hours of load shedding. So the Republican president took advantage of his visit to China to try and lobby the Chinese government to come to Zambia and help us, mitigate this load shedding that we are currently facing by possibly bringing about solar, generated energy, wind generated energy, bio generated energy, as well as thermal generated energy. We need to enhance those, kinds of energy generation systems so that we stop solely depending on hydro, which is prone to climate change. So I'm very much confident that the Chinese government, being what it is and looking at the history of China and Zambia, it has helped us in many avenues of social and economic development. Let's keep our fingers crossed and support the Republican president. Let's not be so negative. You've seen, social media and a lot of members of the opposition coming out, bad-mouthing the trip that the current Republican president made to China, saying no, nothing really tangible would come out of that. Not until nothing comes out of it. I think I would urge the Zambians to support and rally behind our Republican president to actually work closely with the Chinese government so that we can come out of this mess that we are currently, facing.
Now, just on the historical aspect, looking back to some of the infrastructure that Zambia, I don't know if I should use the word inherited from its colonial masters, you will realize that towns like Ndola had a thermal plant where Zesco currently is located. Go to Kitwe where you have Nkana Mine Smelter, you had a thermal plant generating electricity there. And Lusaka and many other districts, all had, thermal power. And it was only after these towns or districts were connected to the national grid that they seem to have abandoned these facilities. What's your make of the current structure of Zesco with regards to where we are coming from to where we are today?
I think on the part of Zesco, the current load shedding that has hit us is a wake-up call. A wake-up call in the sense that its revenue, Zesco's revenue has actually been halved, if I may use that term. If you look at the number of customers Zesco has, and those that are purchasing power, I think the number has reduced, or the amount of money which customers normally spend on buying electricity has actually gone down, which subsequently has affected Zesco's operations in terms of generating as well as distribution of electricity. Those thermal plants that have been abandoned, they were created for a reason. A reason in the sense that Zesco needed not only to depend on hydro, but also thermal. And for thermal, we've got coal in Mamba, a lot of coal there in Mamba, which can actually be mined and being put into those thermal plants such that there is no, largely depending on hydro, which, like I've said, is prone to climate change. But when it comes to thermal power is consistent, it's reliable, and it should be there. It produces electricity to cover even for the mines. So it's a wake-up call to Zesco to look at other alternative sources of energy. Like I said, solar is one of them. And actually solar is very easy to mount, solar is very easy to manage, solar is reliable, and it's there 24/7 because the sun is ever reliable. There's never been a day that the sun has never, shined. It's always there. So Zesco management should use this opportunity, like the president said this is an opportunity for Zambians to now begin thinking outside the box. Outside the box in the sense that we should now not depend only on hydro-powered electricity.
And for those of you watching on your screens, you are looking at a solar plant that has been put up by CEC, Copperbelt Energy in Kitwe, which was recently launched by President Hakainde Hichilema in a way of diversifying amid the current climate change crisis that we are all facing. So the CEC plants are as follows. You've got the Riverside plant, which is generating clean green energy from the Riverside area up to 33 megawatts. And not so far from there, we have another site that was also recently launched by His Excellency the President, which is the CEC Ganaton or Itimpi site, also adding on to power that CEC is providing the mines with. Now, let's look at another argument while we're still on energy, which some energy experts would put across with regards to diversifying its costs, putting up all those solar plants that we've just seen on screen there. It costs a lot, and the tariffs are not so inviting for other people to come in and venture into the aspect of providing power as clean green energy as an alternative source. How would you react to the Zesco tariffs, especially that ERB rejected that emergency application that was recently made? In fact, that was made last month.
I think there is one aspect that the Zambians ought to understand about the electricity that they buy from Zesco. I would be glad, or I would be very certain to let the citizens understand that Zesco still subsidizes electricity. They still subsidize electricity. Out of every penny that you pay, Zesco pays another additional money in order for us to enjoy that electricity. Yes, the tariffs, especially here in Zambia, are made to understand that they are, I think we buy electricity way cheaper than what people in Angola buy their electricity, Zimbabwe, and these other neighboring countries. So Zesco has really operated under very difficult circumstances, and sometimes I fail to understand why Zesco still exists, because it goes through a lot of stress in ensuring that it generates electricity and as well as distribution. At some point, I heard there was need to separate the two components so that the generation becomes a separate entity from distribution. I don't know how far that arrangement has gone with the Zesco management. So the tariffs that we pay to Zesco, I would say they are fair. I would not complain, because I understand I've been to other countries where power is sold to citizens, and the amount of money that is paid for a kilowatt of electricity is quite far much higher than what we pay here. So for Zesco to perform outstandingly and come out of the mess they are in, I think there is need to I would use the term affordably increase their tariff to meet their generating capacity as well as distribution
competitive
capacity.
rates.
Exactly.
Perhaps.
I would say cost-reflective rates should actually be implemented. Believe you me, Zesco has been going through a lot of operational and management challenges that they need to at least. What I would say is that Zesco is living on survival. The head is above the water. They are not sinking. But in as much as they are doing that, they are going through a lot of stress, which at least as Zambians, we need to understand. Yes, the percentage at which they wanted to increase the tariffs was quite too enormous. Looking at the current economic status quo, many Zambians would not have been able to afford to buy electricity at that percentage. But there is need to compromise, to meet somewhere, such that the citizens are not being manipulated or are not being squeezed too much, because already they are facing other economic challenges. So there is need to actually bring about a leverage, reduce the gap, or bring up and meet somewhere where Zesco at least is able to survive the citizens too are able to live a life affordably.
You are watching a review of President Hakainde Hichilema's trip to the People's Republic of China. This is also an interactive platform for those of you watching this on social media. So feel free to drop your comments and let us know, share your thoughts, as well as let us know where you're watching from. Now, let us get back to China and President Hichilema's trip there. The meeting and the signing ceremony with Excellency, the President of Tanzania, our neighboring country, Zambia, Tanzania, you highlighted how far back we go, and I think that's one of the biggest projects that Zambia embarked on. We, under the late Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and his counterpart, the late Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, and that was the creation of the Tanzania-Zambia Railway Authority, TAZARA. Revamping TAZARA, what's your take on that?
Yes, TAZARA was created somewhere in 1976. Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda worked with his colleague, the late Julius Mwalimu Nyerere. Those two were like twins. Even the dress code, you saw how they used to put on those safari suits. It came at a time when Zambia was actually isolated by the Western world. Zambia could not transport its copper, using other means. So Dr. Kaunda realized that we needed to survive. As a nation, we cannot live like an island. China saw an opportunity because they needed the copper for their industries. And the copper that was coming from Zambia.
The economic wealth, the GDP for China back then was not as it is today.
No, it wasn't. It was far much lower. But with the coming in of Zambia giving China, as well as Japan, I think Zambia, China and Japan, together with Tanzania, during the period 1972 to somewhere 1980, they worked so closely together. We were hit with an embargo where we could not transport our copper using Zimbabwe. Remember, Ian Smith was there. There was the Portuguese war in Angola and Mozambique. So there was no other alternative apart from talking to Tanzania. And Julius Mwalimu Nyerere was a very kind and, very good colleague of Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda. Together with the government of China, an agreement was reached to allow Zambia to construct a railway from Kapirimposhi right up to the port of Dar es Salaam so that our copper could find its way through the overseas market. And for real, it worked. The railway was constructed. Our copper was back onto the international market. Of course, China being the biggest beneficiary. Japan too came in, and there was some kind of barter system that used to happen between Zambia and Japan. By then, there was the Emperor Akihito, who worked with Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone to ensure that the Zambian copper is actually being transported to Japan. And there was a barter system that used to happen where mining equipment was being given to Zambia in the exchange of copper. I'm sure the tons of copper would be agreed upon, given to Zambia, and then Japan would bring in the Komatsu large-size bulldozers. We had the Caterpillars, and most of the vehicles that were used by ZCCM then were from Japan. The Mitsubishi, the Toyota DX, Toyota 1000, Toyota Hilux, and even up to now, that traditional arrangement has been there, although the mines are now in foreign hands. But that kept Zambia moving, and we were back on, on the international scene of transporting copper to the overseas market. So the TAZARA is there, but it needs modernization. It has lived its, ancient times of being a railway line of the olden days. Look at Tanzania. I think we saw on social media, they've brought about new wagons, new locomotive engines that are modern and state of the art. Even the movement, I'm sure, is totally different from the old ones. They take much lesser time to move as compared to the old ones. Because once we revive the Tazara railway, as well as Zambia railways as well, then the passage of goods would be very smooth. It will as well reduce the burden on the roads. You've seen how the roads form depression as a result of these trucks carrying the copper and other heavy cargo. Dr. Kaunda designed the Zambia railways as well as the Tazara for a purpose, because he wanted the roads to specifically be used on lighter cargo as compared to what can be carried on the railway line. So as a result of that, we will even be able to increase the lifespan of our roads if we begin using, the Tazara to carry heavy cargo.
Wow. So while we're still centered on transport and how China has helped Zambia and Tanzania in that regard, let's also look at the aspect of having to bring in raw material. I mean, much of the raw material being here. China, you mentioned Japan, big players in the motor industry, which is now going electric. Yes. And Zambia, Congo should be, we should be seeing a plant right here in Ndola that will be creating batteries or manufacturing batteries. Let's briefly touch on that, because it does touch around some of the trade agreements and some of the mandates that the UPND government has set as objectives for them to achieve while they stay in office. How would you react to that particular one?
Yeah, the creation of a manufacturing plant for batteries could have happened not far much longer than yesterday. Because there is what I would call transitioning, moving from the using of fuel-driven vehicles to electric-driven vehicles. So those batteries would be a very good setup for the industries that would be manufacturing electric-powered vehicles. Mind you, Zimbabwe, difficult as they may seem to be, they've already introduced hybrid vehicles. Hybrid vehicles are normally used by those in the business of, taxis, because they are cost effective. You don't use much of fuel, you use more of electricity, and only use fuel at a later stage when you exceed a certain speed limit. Yes, they've already started that. But here we are neighbors with Zimbabwe, and we say, by Zimbabwe, they are going through social and economic difficulties. But I was so perplexed to find that they are far much ahead than us, far much ahead of us when it comes to even electric vehicles. So that plant should be hastened, should be constructed as soon as possible, so that we can begin to import or to buy electric generated or electric driven cars, because it will help us to forgo the fuel. Once that begins, then I think he will be moving with technology, because advanced nations have already even stopped using cars that depend on fuel like petrol and diesel. They've already gone, they've already gone electric. They are using vehicles that use more of the electric batteries than fuel. Of course, sometimes you may find that both fuel and the battery is being used, but more of electricity than fuel, so that it's economically viable.
You are watching a review of President Hakainde Hichilema's trip to the People's Republic of China, getting insights and, of course, looking at how best our country will work with China in the different sectors, from energy to the transport sector, and now we are just about to get into the mining sector, which I know we've briefly touched. Now let's look at the mining sector, Mr. Matafwali. A lot of lessons learned with how China has evolved technological-wise in the aspect of mining and equipment for mining, which you earlier touched on. Let's briefly talk about that as we continue looking at President Hakainde Hichilema's trip to the People's Republic of China, and this time with regards mining.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
I think mining is Zambia's biggest economic mainstay. From way back, God gave Zambia copper. And as at 1972, Zambia was the world's third largest producer of copper, behind the United States of America and the then Soviet Union, now Russia. Now, after the mines were nationalized between 1969 and 1972, we saw a shift and a drop in copper production. Reason being that we had to face some operational challenges. It was quite difficult for Dr. Kaunda to invest in the mining industry. The mining industry became the anchor industry to develop Zambia's social and economic realm. Everything else was centered on copper. The industries that were built in the 9 provinces of Zambia by then, money came from the proceeds that came from the copper, and mostly it was the Copperbelt province. By then, Northwestern province had not yet begun producing copper at a large scale, apart from, I think, the Kalengwa mine. So our copper output between 1976 and somewhere in 1980 began going down after the nationalization of almost all the mining industries, using the Matero and Mulungushi economic reforms. So this actually dissatisfied the former mine owners, who left, I'm sure, in anger, and they could not support Zambia's mining development. They left without actually giving Zambia information on how to continue running the mines. So Dr. Kaunda found it quite so difficult to invest back in the mines. The mines were being used to generate income. It's like you are sucking the cow without giving it enough food so that it can have energy and continue producing the milk. So that is where the biggest problem was. And if you saw towards 1986, the mines had completely stopped producing the copper that was previously being produced. The tons of copper that were being produced had to drastically drop. Hence, the Zambian people now rising against Dr. Kaunda to say things are not okay. The MMD came in and inherited the government from, the government from UNIP. Mm-hmm. They had a different thought about the mines. Mm-hmm. The mines that were previously nationalized, they had to be privatized. Mm-hmm. And there is literally nothing wrong in privatizing industries, but it's how you privatize, because you need to consistently monitor the developing stages of the companies that you've privatized, which Dr. Chiluba did not do. He privatized the mines to impress the Zambian people, but he did not know the implications that would come afterwards. The agreements that were signed by the new mine owners were such that those foreign mine owners, they had only interest in copper. Anything non-mining, they couldn't actually show any interest. Sports, you know, the trade schools, the hospitals, the secondary schools like Mpelembe, and other trust schools that were built by the ZCCM. They did not have interest in those. Their main interest was the copper and sell it and take the money to their countries of origin. Now, fast forward, during the Mwanawasa tenure, between 2001 and 2008, before, I mean, that's the time of late President Mwanawasa, we had the development of Kansanshi, we had the development of Lumwana and Kalumbila. Those were projects which were initiated during the tenure of late President Levi Mwanawasa. But they were actually activated or commissioned during the PF government. Now, if we were, I would give an example, if we were producing, let's say, 1 million tons of copper with only Konkola, Mchanga, Mufulira, Luansha, and possibly Ron, we need to increase production capacity. But now, we have never increased our production capacity in spite of opening up other mines. So it simply tells that there is somewhere where we are missing it. Because I believe from 1972, being the world's third copper producer, to being almost, I don't know where we are now. I think even Congo by that time had not gone beyond us in terms of copper production. But it's because we have not invested so much in copper production, and we've given so much powers to foreign mine owners such that whatever that they do, they control even the revenue that is supposed to be enjoyed by the Zambian people.
Right, so just on that point, the UPND government came in and found a number of mines had issues, some of which were in courts, and there was the aspect of having to negotiate. And it's only a few weeks ago that we saw President Hichilema officially reopen some of these mines. And a good take out of it is on the shareholding as well, where we see that the Zambian government this time around, unlike before, is holding more shares in most of our mining companies. While we are still on mining, I know it doesn't directly touch on China, but perhaps we could briefly touch on that aspect. Your reaction to that?
Okay. You know, the Zambian government has set its target on copper production. 3 million metric tons, I think, in the next 10 years should be realized. I heard the Honorable Minister of Mines, Mr. Pochanda Kawuswe, giving a preview of what he's expecting of the mines. Mopani Copper Mines was recently given to International Resource Holdings of Abu Dhabi. They pumped in about $650 million US, which is quite an outstanding figure when it comes to copper production. That is the mine which had, I would say, stopped producing copper at a full scale after the withdrawal of Glencore. So we were limited in the production of copper. Now they've come in, and according to reports that have come in, my brother works there, said no, copper production has actually resumed, and we intend to increase as time goes by, because a mine that was a bit dormant, it has to be resuscitated, and resuscitation begins with procuring of new equipment so that you match the international standards. So with Mopani Copper Mines being operational, we are rest assured that the tons of copper that will be produced will actually increase. Then just a few weeks ago, we saw Vedanta being given back, officially being given back Konkola, Nchanga, and Nampundwe mines by His Excellency Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. And before actually the mine was repossessed by the PF government, Vedanta had started developing the Konkola Deep in Chidirawombwe, where we understand, or where we understood that huge deposits of copper would have actually been extracted to improve on the output. But sadly, it happened at such a time when they were almost midway completing that project. So it was abandoned, and I believe the coming in of Vedanta, or the resuming of Vedanta operating KCM, would reignite the development of the Konkola Deep Mining Project, which they themselves understand so well. Now, a word of caution to KCM and Vedanta as the major shareholders of KCM is that President Hakainde Hichilema did speak to the management of Vedanta to say what happened in the PF and how you manage the mine under the PF should be totally different from how you are going to handle the mine under my leadership. It happened at such a time that they completely stopped mining copper concentrate from Chidirawombwe, Konkola, and Nampundwe. They opted to be importing copper ore from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Chingola just became a processing plant. So what does that mean? It means those employees that were directly involved in extracting copper had to be laid off. It simply means unemployment. And the number of employees had actually drastically reduced from the 14,000 that was there then when they were buying, I would say buying the mine, to somewhere around 7,000, almost half. And eventually, I think about 4,000 employees. So President Hakainde Hichilema has put Vedanta on the spotlight. And he said, I would put you under my armpit so that I'm seeing whatever is happening there. Should there be a lapse and failure to actually fulfill the sale agreement that has been signed, then please consider us going different ways. And I believe Vedanta knows what is at stake insofar as Nampundwe, KCM, Anchanga, Konkola, as well as the smelter in Kitwe is concerned. And I'm sure they are putting this and that together to ensure that they did not disappoint President Hakainde Hichilema. Because if they fail to operate, it would actually mean those that repossessed the mine had a good reason for repossessing the mine. Because it's the same Vedanta who said those mines were non-profit making. But the same people have actually been given the mines, they've been given a benefit of doubt by President Hakainde Hichilema and his administration. Because should they fail to perform, then it will still come back to him. See the people that you gave the mines. We told you the reason why we grabbed it from them, it's because of ABCD.
All right. Well, now let's get back to China, the China-Africa Summit in Beijing that came to an end, and President Hakainde Hichilema and other African heads of state were part of this summit, where China brought together African leaders in discussing various issues affecting them. I saw on different presidential pages, each president had a bilateral meeting with the Chinese president and other senior Chinese government officials. Now, on the sidelines of the 2024 Forum on Africa, China-Africa Summit, President Hakainde Hichilema had a brief meeting with Kenyan President William Ruto and mainly discussed issues affecting both Zambia and Kenya in the aspect of agriculture, climate change. Perhaps let's look at what lessons can we learn from Chinese technology and how can that help our agriculture sector?
Well, you know, there is one thing I like about China. China is very innovative. China is very hardworking. China is adaptive. China is user-friendly. China is reliable. I've mentioned 5 things about China. And it's the more reason why you would find that any country that is socially and economically prospering has got a link with China, including the United States of America. The USA is a larger beneficiary of the Chinese people in terms of production, manufacturing industry, agriculture, electronic, and the like. Why? Those people are technologically advanced and they are able to even make a hole through the needle. They are a gifted people. So when we go into a relationship with China, we should be rest assured that something beneficial would come out of that. The China Mulungushi textile, I'm told it's one of those projects that would eventually, or sooner than later, begin to be processing, clothing material. And once that starts, rest be assured that the cotton industry would grow. Then Eastern Province, being one of the largest cotton producers, would actually benefit the most because of late, about 70% of cotton production has drastically been reduced. So it's like a shot in the arm for Eastern Province, being the province that is mostly prominent with cotton production. And Mulungushi, the China Mulungushi textile would definitely be opened, and the Chinese government would come in with, I'm sure, latest technologies in trying to ensure
machinery has actually been
has
coming
already
in.
arrived. Yes,
as we speak, they are currently installing modern equipment for the Zambia-China Mulungushi textiles. You may continue.
Exactly. These are the things that we used to have. We had Kafio textile. We had the same China Mulungushi textile. We never used to, import clothing materials. We had swap spinning mills here. The company that even employed, a larger population of Ndola residents, it just went into oblivion within a blinking of an eye. So I believe with the coming in of the Zambia-China Mulungushi textile, I'm hoping that the clothing industry, even here in Ndola, should begin to operate such that we stop importing clothing material. We are a country that was once even supplying safari suits to European countries like Germany through Sirius International. The cotton material that was being locally produced, the suits that were being locally produced. Sirius International was well known in Europe for its suits that it used to produce even for government officials in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. So China, like I said, is user-friendly, is one country that you can tame. It depends on how you handle them when they reach your country. They are there in South Africa. They operate, most of the industries in South Africa are largely operated by the Chinese government. There is Samsung there is Toyota, most of it is actually being run by the Chinese government. So China has heavily invested in most African countries. One of them is Ghana. Ghana, before the coming in of COVID-19, was regarded as the fastest growing economy in the whole world. not only in Africa, in the whole world. Had it not been for COVID, I don't know where Ghana would have been by now. But Ghana, these are countries that by 1972 were far much behind to Zambia. Kenya, even Malaysia, could not match Zambia's GDP. But we missed it somewhere, and we need to put our broken pieces together. And I believe President Hakainde Hichilema would learn from the past 6 presidents that we've had, the successes and their failures, so that he can come up with his own trajectory of, developing this country. He needs the support of even the opposition leaders. Those that few, they are intellectuals, they are knowledgeable, they should not just criticize him. They should sit down with him. Brother, this is what we can do to develop this country. Development of the country requires that there is unity in the country. Where there is no unity, it would be quite difficult for Zambia to achieve meaningful social and economic development. So the opposition would need to call for an endeavor and help their brother to develop this country. Objective criticism would be better than the criticism that would want to bring him down. Then once they bring him down, they bring themselves down, because the suffering does not choose. It will hit everyone. Sure.
Right. Well, Mr. Matafwali, thank you so much for coming through and just providing a brief insight into President Hakainde Hichilema's trip to the People's Republic of China, where he went to also attend the China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Beijing, which was hosted by President Xi Jinping, and other African leaders did attend as well, and we saw a number of bilateral meetings between Zambia and China, and also Zambia and other countries like Kenya. Well, this has been a production from the Copperbelt Studios of Zanis. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, have a pleasant day.